Pepe, you talk about feeding behaviors, what children eat. Who is guilty if something goes wrong?
I think we're all guilty because ultimately however children end up eating, both in terms of the food they take and how they take it, it really depends on what parents know, what they're taught, what the environment, including the media, tells them to do or not to do, what the healthcare professionals are supposed to be telling them, and I think what society as a whole has to offer, including industry in terms of what products it makes available that are give them the potential for a better choice of foods, especially in the first 2 years of life.
But parents think they're doing everything okay, if you ask them. So what is the issue? They are giving too much French fries, I've learned. The vegetables are not enough. So what could you do? What could you do?
There's a few clear messages that I think we need to get better at delivering. And many parents will even theoretically know this, but we need to find better ways of delivering the message in a way that they can actually execute it. So the first, of course, is to breastfeed. And there is a good, I think, solid reasons why exclusive breastfeeding and the more prolonged that you can do it, the better, and that will help. The other is the introduction. It's also clear, if you start before 4 months, and for some children between 4 and 6 months of age, that may still be too early. And there's some association between feeding too early. So sticking to breastfeeding or formula if it's necessary before starting solid foods, and certainly not before 4 months of age is another critical thing. We find too many babies, for example, get sugared beverages, and parents don't think of it as a food. And they're already using that in a bottle, for example, below, at 4 months. The other is we do need to increase parents' understanding of how to feed, because they give up too quickly, particularly as it relates to vegetables, for example. And vegetables are a key component because if you feed more vegetables, then there's less room for other things to take space and take up those calories that a baby needs. And much of those calories are taken up by sugary beverages, by desserts, by sweets. Limiting those is another big message that we need to give.
Another real concern is the high protein intake. I have seen the high sodium intake, despite we are always talking about hypertension and limiting sodium intake later in life, and low iron intake. Those three issues are also very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Protein intake is going to depend primarily on what they're drinking in terms of formula, if they're not exclusively breastfeeding, which would be the ideal. And decreasing the amount of other protein sources, for example, certain meats with saturated fat. Meat is not a bad weaning food. Unfortunately, as we've learned from the FIT study, sausages and bacon become one of the first meats, hot dogs in particular, which from the protein point of view are contributing more protein than is needed, and on top of that are contributing saturated fat and sodium. Those are not necessary foods for a child below 4
and the iron issue?
And the iron issue, I think there's really very few ways of really overcoming that. Probably the simplest is to stick to infant cereals that are fortified with iron, which are broadly available, are not necessarily more expensive than adult cereals, many of which unfortunately have sugar. So sticking to iron-fortified cereals is probably the easiest way to increase the amount of iron intake.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.